Ethan Cross once measured time in profits and power. His mornings began with private cars and ended with champagne toasts on glass balconies overlooking the city he believed he owned. His name carried weight, spoken in boardrooms with respect, sometimes fear. Success had become his identity, and he wore it like armor. Then the armor cracked. It began with a deal that looked flawless on paper. Advisors praised it. Analysts applauded it. Ethan ignored the quiet doubt in his chest, the one voice that warned him not to rush. When the acquisition collapsed, it didn't fall gently, it detonated. Stock prices plunged. Creditors panicked. Lawsuits surfaced overnight, each one carving away another piece of his empire. Betrayal followed close behind. His business partner, the man who had toasted him for years, testified against him to save himself. The headlines were merciless. Golden Titan exposed. Billionaire's empire built on illusions. Cameras waited outside his home, hungry for a reaction he refused to give. At home, the silence was worse. His wife packed her things without shouting, without tears. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said softly, and that hurt more than the lawyer's threats. Friends stopped calling. Invitations disappeared. The world that once orbited Ethan drifted away, leaving him isolated in its shadow. Weeks later, he found himself sitting in the vast lobby of his former headquarters. The building still gleamed, but it no longer belonged to him. The security guards avoided his eyes. Rain hammered against the windows like an accusation. Ethan stared at his reflection in the polished marble floor and barely recognized the man looking back. For the first time in his life, no one needed him. No assistant waited for instructions. No board demanded answers. There was only the hollow echo of his footsteps and a crushing realization settling into his chest. Ethan Cross had lost everything that once defined him, and he had no idea who he was without it. The building came alive after midnight, not with voices or ambition, but with echoes, soft footsteps, the distant hum of elevators, the whisper of cleaning machines. Ethan Cross returned to the lobby not because he had business there, but because he had nowhere else to go. The city outside felt hostile, crowded with reminders of what he used to be. That was when he noticed the janitor. The man moved slowly, deliberately, pushing a mop across the marble floor as if the task deserved respect. He hummed an old, unfamiliar tune, low and steady, a sound that felt strangely out of place in a building once ruled by urgency and ego. His uniform was worn, his shoes scuffed, yet there was nothing rushed or bitter in his movements. "You're working late," Ethan said, his voice rough from disuse. The janitor looked up and smiled. Not the forced kind Ethan was used to, but something genuine. "Bills don't sleep," he replied calmly. "Neither do worries." Ethan almost laughed. Instead, he nodded. The man introduced himself as Daniel. He spoke plainly, without curiosity about Ethan's presence or past. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Everyone else either pitied Ethan or blamed him. Daniel did neither. Night after night, Ethan lingered in the lobby. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't. Daniel talked about his daughter, how she insisted on bedtime stories even when he came home exhausted, how she believed he was the strongest man in the world simply because he never missed a promise. He spoke of double shifts and missed meals with the same calm tone others used to discuss weather. Ethan listened, surprised by how easy it felt. Daniel never asked who he was, never searched his face for recognition. To him, Ethan was just another tired man sitting in the shadows. One evening, Ethan finally asked, "Doesn't it bother you, cleaning a place like this?" Daniel paused, resting his hands on the mop. "I don't clean buildings," he said. "I provide. That's the job. Everything else is just pride." The words lingered in the air long after Daniel returned to work. Ethan watched the man push the mop across the floor, realizing something uncomfortable and unfamiliar stirring inside him. For the first time since his fall, Ethan felt smaller, not humiliated, but humbled. And oddly enough, it felt like the beginning of something rather than the end. The night was heavier than usual. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the city into a wash of broken lights. Ethan sat hunched on the lobby bench, his hands clasped together as if holding himself in one piece. For weeks, he had listened. Tonight, the weight inside him finally demanded a voice. "I don't know how to exist like this," Ethan said quietly. The words surprised even him. Daniel stopped mopping. He didn't rush to respond. He leaned the mop against the wall and sat beside Ethan, leaving a respectful distance. Silence stretched. Not awkward, but patient. I wake up and there's nothing, Ethan continued. No meetings. No purpose. People only remember me for what I lost. His jaw tightened. I built everything. And still, it vanished. Daniel nodded slowly. You built things, he said. But did you build yourself? The question landed like a blow. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. No one had ever asked him that before. I fail every day, Daniel went on. I miss school events. I come home too tired to smile sometimes. But when my daughter looks at me, I know I'm still standing. That's how I measure success. Ethan laughed bitterly. Love doesn't pay lawsuits. No, Daniel agreed gently. But it keeps you human while you're paying them. Ethan finally broke. The words spilled out. About the betrayal, the shame of being watched as he fell, the terror of becoming invisible. His voice cracked when he admitted the truth he had avoided for months. Without money, I don't know who I am. Daniel listened without interruption. When Ethan finished, Daniel picked up his mop again but didn't start cleaning. Then this is the best thing that ever happened to you, he said. Ethan looked up sharply. You call this a gift? I call it a mirror, Daniel replied. You lost everything that told you who you were. Now you get to choose. The rain softened outside. Ethan felt something shift. Not relief, not hope exactly, but clarity. He had spent his life protecting an image, not a soul. Daniel, with almost nothing, carried himself like a man who could lose it all and still remain whole. For the first time, Ethan understood, failure hadn't destroyed him. It had stripped him bare. And in that emptiness, something new was waiting to be built. Ethan Cross did not return to the world with an announcement. There were no press releases, no interviews promising redemption. Instead, he started quietly, almost invisibly, in a rented office with second-hand furniture and a single notebook filled with handwritten ideas. Each page carried a question he had never asked before. Who does this help? He met with small business owners others had overlooked, family-run shops, struggling startups, people who worked as hard as they hoped. He listened more than he spoke. Deals moved slowly now, built on trust rather than urgency. Profits came, but they were no longer the point. Fair wages, transparent contracts, and long-term stability mattered more than headlines. Months passed. Then a year. Ethan's name began to surface again, this time whispered with curiosity instead of envy. The success he rebuilt felt different, lighter, steadier. It didn't demand his soul in exchange. At night, he slept. One evening, Ethan returned to the building where everything had fallen apart. The lobby looked the same, but he was not. Daniel was finishing his shift, his shoulders slumped with familiar exhaustion. I need someone, Ethan said, handing him a folder. Someone who understands responsibility without ego. Daniel frowned as he opened it. Operations manager. He shook his head. I'm a janitor. You're a leader, Ethan replied. You just never had a title. Daniel hesitated. For the first time, doubt crossed his calm expression. My daughter will have weekends with her father, Ethan said softly. I promise. Weeks later, Daniel walked into the new office wearing a suit that still felt unfamiliar. He worked the same way he always had, carefully, honestly, without cutting corners. The team respected him quickly. They felt safe around him. Things worked better. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the windows, Ethan watched Daniel explain a process to a young employee with patience and clarity. The sight filled him with quiet gratitude. You changed my life, Ethan said later. Daniel smiled, the same simple smile from the lobby. No, he replied. You just stopped confusing success with worth. Ethan looked around the room, not at the money, but at the people. For the first time, he understood what real wealth felt like. And this time, nothing could take it away.